the September Entuity Tech Talk. These sessions are specially created for you, our Entuity and BNC Entuity Network Management users, and we hope you'll find them useful. Don't forget that all of the Tech Talks are always available via video on the resources page at entuity.com for your reference. I'm John Diamond, and I'm the Principal Solutions Architect at Entuity, and also with me today is my colleague Larry Bailon, who's a Field Systems Engineer, and we'll be your hosts for the next 30 minutes or so. Today's Tech Talk session is the first of three, all focusing on the new Event Management System released in Entuity 13.5. And by the way, for those BNC users with us, that is equivalent to ENMA 10.5. It is such an important function within Entuity Network Management that to fully explain it, we need more than just one Tech Talk. As you can see from the agenda, what we're going to be talking about today is the key differences between the old system of event management and the new one that's just been introduced, what you need to understand about the differences, what facilities you get as part of the standard configuration, I call out of the box. That includes port flapping detection, and that's a good example of a capability, and we provide that configuration in an out-of-the-box manner, and I'll take you through an example of that. And we also supply some additional rules which are turned off by default, but I'll show you how to turn them on. Then Larry will take over and talk about the whole concept of event and incident suppression. And he's got some demonstrations to show you for that. And that will be followed up by a demonstration of event forwarding integration into BMC's BPPM or Proactive Net product. Then we'll wrap up with a question and answer session. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. We put the call on the mute mode to eliminate any outside noise. Do please feel free to ask questions at any time via the chat panel. We will have time at the end to take those questions as well as answer any that have been posted to the chat panel. So with all of the preliminaries complete, let's begin. And as I promised, we're going to be kicking off with a discussion of the old versus the new aspect of event management. Now to do that, what I'm going to do is show you how they both looked, the old and the new. This is the new 13.5 web user interface. I've selected the My Network view, which, as most of you will be aware, represents all of the components that are under management. Now, if I were to then select the event menu option, by default, this is going to show me all of the incidents that are currently open. And I'll tell you in a moment the difference between an incident and an event. These are the incidents, but I can look at the raw event by selecting that hyperlink and flicking it over into events mode. And this is equivalent to what previously on 13.0 and before would have been referred to as the event history. Subtle difference, this is an auto-updating page rather than before where the event history was a static page. If you leave this on the screen as new events come in, they will be automatically added. You'll see there, we've just had a big outage cleared, and all of those outages there have just been cleared. How's that for timing? Okay, so we've got these events coming in. Go back and see the incident. Now, there's a lot of similarity between what is now called an incident and what used to be called an open event. If I go back and take a look at 13.0, if you look here, by default with the event, you'll see the open event. You can show the event history, which as I just mentioned is very similar to that events page, which now appears in 13.5. This is not an auto-updating screen, so that won't auto-update as new events come in. So let's go back to the utilization high cleared event was raised because the utilization was no longer above the threshold, then that open event would have been automatically cleared out. However, let's take as an example a situation where you've got a port that is configured to generate traps and send them through to the Entuity server. That port transitions from the operationally up state to the operationally down state. That will cause two events to be generated. One of them will be generated from the trap, and the other one will be generated by the polling, which by default would happen every 5 minutes, but you can configure that to operate more swiftly if you wish. Now that would generate two different events at two slightly different times. The trap event would come in first, followed by, at some point within the next 5 minutes, an event for the polling of that state change. Now they both, as far as the end user is concerned, mean the same thing. They're telling you that the port has come down. However, they're two completely different events. Now, if we go over to 13.5, what will happen is that first of all, we will combine those two different raw events into the same event type. So they'll both be turned into a new event called port down. You'll get two of them, one from the trap, one from the polling, but they'll both be called port down. They will have slightly different details, but they'll be the same event type. Furthermore, we will then combine them into a new incident, which is used to show when there is a state change on a port. Now I'm going to actually take the opportunity at this point of showing you all of the configuration behind that. All of the configuration of the new event management system is configurable by you, the administrator, or you can delegate other users to have that same permission as well. You don't have to let everybody loose with it, but it is controllable by the administrator. If I go down on the administration menu and select event administration, first of all, you get a diagram of how the whole event management system works. Starting off with the raw events, these are the same events that you've known previously in previous versions of Entuity, many different types of events and ways that they're derived, all funnel into the new event management system. This contains rule processing, and events can be processed with one or multiple different rules. You can configure, we provide a bunch of them, I'll show you those in a moment. And then once those events have been processed, they can then be stored in the database, and if necessary, cause event forwarding out to integrated products such as DMC, BPPM, or trapped forwarding, or any other form of event-based operation. We also provide an additional stage of processing after the storage and forwarding, where the same sort of rules can be applied, but that will take place after that forwarding. At any point during the rule processing, new events can be generated and existing events can be changed, and they can then be fed back into the beginning of the processing stage. That's a very important aspect of how the flexibility of the new rule processing system can be leveraged. Finally, once the events have come out of all of this rule processing, they can then also be turned into incidents, and then those incidents can be displayed and saved. So if I were to go in and take a look at what I've just been talking about, which was port flapping, I can go in and take a look at the rules. Remember, there's the pre-storage and the post-storage set of rules. The ones that are processed before they're stored in the database and forwarded, and the ones that are processed afterwards. By default, we provide a bunch of rules in the pre-storage folder. Post-storage folder by default is empty. And I'm going to show you some of the rules that we provide. If we take a look at this folder called flapping, there are three rules in here. First of all, let's take the first one. This one, when I look at the details of it, will take either the port link down event, which is derived from the trap, or the port operationally down event, which is derived from holding. No matter which one it is, if it detects either of them, functionality when the port comes back up again. Now for the really clever bit, the port flapping. We have some rules. First of all, there's a generic type of rule, but then we've got 4 special rules for more complex processing, one of which is flapping detection. And that's used here by default for detecting a state where a port is flapping up and down on a regular basis. What do we mean by regular basis? Well, as part of the standard configuration, we set up a 2-minute window. You can change that. And within that 2-minute window, we say that if there are at least 2 port down events, remember, that's the new type of event generated by the rules up here, and 2 port up events, no matter whether they came from traps or polling, doesn't matter, then that qualifies to call that a flapping port. At which point, it will hold on to the most recently received event. It won't forward it, but it'll forward a new event called port flapping. See that in the user interface. Thanks for the musical interlude. At this point, we will then prevent further forwarding of those incoming state transition events until this condition no longer is true. Once the port stops flapping, whether it has ended up in the up state or the down state, it doesn't matter, then provided you get to a point when you no longer have 2 transitions up, 2 transitions down within the previous 2 minutes, it will come out of the port flapping state and it will forward the most recently received incoming event. So had it ended up in the down state, that's what we'll see. Had it ended up in the up state, it will then cause the incident to be cleared. Okay, enough with theory, let's look at practice. I'm going to go to my lab view, and what I'm also going to do is set up a viewing filter. Now these viewing filters are totally independent from event and incident filters, which are the event filters are relevant to event forwarding in integrated situation. They are controlled on a view basis. These viewing filters just help you make sense of the incidents and events that you're seeing on the screen. I've configured one, I've called it port status problems only, and it's only going to show me the port status incidents which are derived from port state changes. Any other type of incident is going to be hidden from me right at the moment. Now I've got on my lab desk here a plug. I'm going to pull the plug out, and in a little while you'll see that that's generated a trap, and that trap is associated with a port. It's going to be port 12 on the ANSAN switch. And you're going to see that it will have generated a port status problem incident, and it's confirming that it is port 12 on the ANSAN switch, and these are the details provided within that trap. Now at this point I'm going to put the plug back in again. There we go, plug's back in, and in a few seconds time you will see that that incident will be cleared because the trap representing link up, which will generate a port up event, will clear out that incident. So in this case it's very much like an open event that you will have been used to before. Now, I'm going to pull the plug out again. And then in a few seconds time, I'm going to put the plug back in again. So at this point, I'm actually generating a flapping condition. Okay, plug's back in. And now I'm going to pull the plug back out again. So I've flapped that state support up and down. At this point, we'll have got more than 2 state transitions up and down within a 2-minute period. So you just seen that the details on this port status problem have now switched over from telling us that the port was down to telling us that it's in the flapping condition. We're not going to hear any more from that until it no longer has 2 transitions up and 2 transitions down within the previous 2-minute window. That will happen within a few seconds because I stopped waggling the port up and down, and I've left the plug out of the socket, so that what will happen is that it will transition from saying that it's flapping to saying that it's down. That will have been the most recently received event, and that rule that I showed you earlier will now let that event through, causing the incident to be updated to show that the port is now I wanted that rule to work with a 3-minute or a 4-minute or a 5-minute or even a 39-second, for whatever reason, window, I could have configured that using the rule editor that I showed you earlier. Now, the other aspects of these rules are that you can create new ones, you can create folders of rules. You saw a folder earlier, that flapping folder, which is actually referred to as an event processing stage, can be created so you can gather them together. What you'll see here on the screen, as I predicted, is that that port is now showing that it's in the down state. That was actually derived from a polled event as opposed to a trap-derived event, and it's saying that the port is administratively up but operationally down. Finally, to go back to the editor, event editor within event administration, and take another look at those rules. I said that we provided some for an event processing. Now these are available to desensitize certain event generation. And it does so using an NEVM method, which is where you can take a certain proportion of time, say that an event or a state will have been in that state for a given percentage of a given amount of time in order to say it is bad enough to generate an event. Now, you'll see these icons indicate that these rules are disabled. Now, I actually enabled this one earlier, but if I were to go in here, I'll show you what I mean by that. This one applies to network outage events. And they're saying that a network outage, if this rule is enabled, which it is at the moment, because I turned it on earlier, it will only generate the network outage incident if you've had a network outage solidly for 100% of the last 300 seconds. Network outage events are evaluated on a 2-minute cycle, which means that if you have that lasts for just 2 minutes, that will not qualify for that rule, which means that that outage for 2 minutes would not cause the network outage incident to be opened. It would have had to have been opened for at least 3 consecutive 2-minute periods, which in fact would be 6 minutes to exceed the 300-second or 5-minute time frame. You could adjust that. So, for example, if I said that it needed to be at least 60% of the last 25 minutes, then that would mean that it would have to have been in an outage state for at least a total of 15 minutes out of the last 25 minutes. A very flexible system, and it means that you can desensitize it so you don't get an incident the first time a particular event is raised. Particularly relevant if you're then feeding these into a paging system and you don't want necessarily to be got out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning because you had a 2-minute outage that went away. So with that said, I could turn that back off again simply by disabling it, and then that is no longer being processed. I'm going to pass control over to Larry, and he is going to take you through the concept of event suppression. Bear with me 1 moment. Larry, it's all yours.
Thank you, JD. I just got that, so I'm going to share out my desktop here. So we're going to take, I'll take just 2 short examples to talk about event suppression. So in the latest version of software, what's happened is we've implemented the rules processing. So in the previous release, if you wanted to suppress events from a device, you could simply right-click on the device name or IP address, and there would be a menu selection that allowed you to suppress events. The same was true if you selected a port level event as well. That's no longer there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an example of configuring a maintenance window where you want to suppress all events from all elements within a view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new view. I'm going to label that view maintenance. And then for the contents, I'm going to leave it empty. You can apply different filters to that, so you could actually bring in devices via IP ranges or subnets, like you can when you create a normal view. What you can't do is apply other specific filters to that, such as filtering on a partial device name. That requires regular expressions, which is something that isn't in the current software, but is scheduled for a future release. So I'm going to just click OK here to create the view. And then I'm just going to take a couple of devices I'm going to take a couple of switches and just put them into that maintenance view. And once I've created the view, now I'm going to go into my event administration. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new rule. So I'm going to click the Rules tab here. There is already under pre-storage, there's one for suppression. So I'm just going to put that into this group. And currently there are no rules associated with this. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to add a rule. I'm going to add a generic rule. There are some the pre-configured rules that JD had already discussed. And I'm just going to call this rule to suppress all events and devices under maintenance. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to assign a condition to that. And I'm going to, the condition is that all tests must succeed. So I need to add a test. And from the pull-down menu, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a view membership test. And then I'm going to select the maintenance view. So this rule is going to apply to devices that have been placed into that maintenance view. And then I have to add an action. And then what I'm going to do is the default action is to actually discard the event, which is what I want to do. I click OK. So now that new rule has been created, and you'll see in the upper right-hand corner, anytime you change any of the rules processing, you have to save the changes, and then you have to deploy the project. So up here, it's telling me that this project has unsaved changes, which is that change I just made. I have two things I can do. I can save and immediately deploy the project, or I can just save it. But I've actually made a mistake. I've created this rule, and this is to suppress these things immediately. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in and edit this rule, and you'll see there's a secondary tab here that allows me to set a schedule. And that's what I want to do, because my maintenance window is actually going to start on Saturday. And then it's going to be a 2-hour maintenance window, so I'll just enable this filter, select the date, and then set that for 2 hours ahead. I click OK, and now that maintenance window is scheduled for 2 hours. I'm going to save the project. I can assign a description of the project fairly anal retentive, so I use numbers. But there are actually, as you'll see when we deploy that, the software assigns version numbers to all of the projects in sequential order. And now I'm going to just change this to enable it. I click OK. And then I'm going to go to the View All Projects. And the version number that's been deployed is currently 10. If it's in a draft status, the version number is 0. So I simply highlight that, and I click Deploy, and I'll get a message here saying that it may take some time for that to be deployed. But now, if I go back to that maintenance window, that maintenance folder, these devices have now, we're going to suppress all the events from those devices at the appropriate time. One of the things that you can do is you can have an operator who has the ability to add and delete devices from a view. You can also add ports and not necessarily have access to the rule set. So you can have the role mapping associated with standard functions mapped to this particular view, so that the person can actually edit devices in the view. The nice thing about this is once that maintenance window is over, that rule still exists. If I go back here into the event administration and into the rules, and I go into my pre-storage rules and suppressions, you'll see that that this is still here, and I can just edit that rule. and then select a new maintenance window. So once that rule is created, it's there, and it can be modified. One of the other things you can do, if I go back to this Explorer view and just I can create a new view, for example, that suppress network outage events. And again, I can go back into the event administration, and I can create a new rule. And I can add the rule. Again, I'm going to add this, and I'm just going to suppress my network outage events. And then the condition here is I'm going to add two tests. So first is a view membership test, which tells me that it has to be a member of this view. And then I'm going to add a second test, which is an event type test. And I'll add that. And I'll scroll down to N. And I'll add my network outage event. So I can suppress this by adding an action step to discard the event. I'll click OK, and I'm just going to save and deploy these. So one of the things that we do allow with the drag and drop interface, so I haven't added anything in here. I can actually go to a view and change it to the event view and find a network outage event. So this is actually associated with a port unreachable, and I can simply drag that into this view. And now that port element is in there. So you can actually take the specific event that you want to suppress and just drag the incident into the view, and that will add the specific element that that incident was raised against. So there's a lot of flexibility with the new rules processing and some of the drag and drop functionality. The last thing I'm going to show, in the interest of time, is I go back to the administration here, just to bring up the diagram. I've got an integration with BPPM. So the BPPM acts on events. So we will forward events before they're turned into incidents. And one of the events that I'm going to show, if I go to the proactive net interface here, let me just find a specific event I'm looking for, which is the threshold crossing event. So on this particular device, we've had a threshold crossing event. So the event that shows up within BPPM is a port utilization high event. Now if I go to the cross launch, this will launch back into the Entuity Web UI, and I'll bring this up, and you'll see that there are 5 events associated with this particular port. And if I click this, this will filter on here. But you'll notice that within BPPM, what we see, and I'll go back to this view here, is we actually see the port utilization high event. Just find the correct, actually, I'm just going to relaunch this. But this shows up as a port abnormality. And if I look at that and look at the details, then you'll see the actual port utilization high event. So there's a reason for that. This is an incident. So an incident may refer to one or more underlying event types. So if I go to the event administration and look at my incidents, scroll down to the port status problem incident and click the edit button, you'll see here, oops, that's the wrong one, sorry, port utilization abnormality, and edit that. You'll see that this particular incident is actually generated by or opened by 2 types of events, either a port utilization high threshold crossing event or a port utilization low threshold crossing event. So that's the difference, is that we're actually sending the event information to the upstream event system But within the event viewer, we're actually going to show you the incident, unless you change the view to view the events. With that, I'm going to turn it back to JD for a wrap-up.
Thank you very much, Larry. Pat, while we've been talking, have we had any questions coming on the chat panel?
No, we haven't, JD. So if you want to give everyone a little bit of time, see if we have anything come in, and you can kind of wrap it up in the meantime.
Okay, well, let me just throw out a few extra ideas. Larry gave you some great advice there about setting up some strategies for suppressing events. And of course, if an event is suppressed, it won't then generate an incident from it. He recommended use of views, and those views can either apply to all event types, or you can pin them down to specific event types. One thing you could also do, just to keep it all manageable within the view structure, is have a view that contains multiple sub-views, and each sub-view could then apply to components that you want specific event types suppressed on, so that you can have one for network outage events, another one for threshold crossing type events, however you wish to organize it, just to keep the user interface clutter under control. What you could also do is allocate different sub-views to different users. So different users could be permissioned to maintain their own set of suppressions without the necessary permission to modify or corrupt anybody else's list. So you could have many different ways that these all funnel in and be maintained, and that's under your control as an administrator, how you want to organize your system. So anything else that we should be talking about, Pat?
Nope, I think that's it.
Okay, well, to wrap up, as is customary, we will send you a summary of today's Tech Talk in a video format for your future use. If you have any questions on this topic or any other technical topic, then do please contact us. And there is a special email address on the screen at the moment, tech.talk@entuity.com. And there's one more thing I would request. If you've got a topic that you think would be a good one to discuss on one of these Tech Talk sessions, please let us know. Because you know what? Other people probably want that topic talked about as well, but they're just afraid to ask. So stick your neck out, ask, and we'll see what we can do for you. With that, I hope to see you again in October. October the